So welcome back to French Ear Trumpet. French Ear Trumpet number 15. So there's over 15 hours of these two Herberts chatting. I'm sure there's a CIA black site somewhere where they're playing this on repeat to get them to talk. I'm sure they will do. So my name's Colin. I've got a channel called French Countryside Life, and we've got Andy with his own channel, which is
AJ in France.
AJ in France, brilliant channel. Go and take a look. So the subject, we get around to that in a minute. So when I was a chauffeur, there was 3 tenets that you didn't do, or there was 3 rules, if you like. Okay, the first one was you speak when you're spoken to. The second one was you be discreet. So what's said in the car stays in the car. And the third rule was never talk about politics or religion. Well, I'm not a chauffeur anymore. Let's talk about politics. There's an ancient Chinese curse called "May you live in interesting times." We're certainly living in interesting times. So whilst the world lurches to the right in the politics, the UK seems to have lurched back to the left, which is curious. In France, you've got the rise of what some would call the far right from the National Rally Party, which incidentally I'd look into it, and seems to have its roots in the Vichy France, who were the government imposed on the French people by the Germans during the Second World War. Some would call them collaborationists. Most people would call them collaborationists. Yeah. So Emmanuel Macron, the president, made a snap decision following the results in the European elections to take his Renaissance Party to the people. And it's kind of backfired in a spectacular way. The question that I'd put to you, Anne, is, are they really far right? Because politics, in the recent past, I suppose, has been so left that this so-called far right, is it really centrist?
Interesting question, and I think the first thing you got to ask yourself is what's the definition of left and right of politics? Really, you hear it bandied around quite a lot, and I didn't know where the terms actually came from. It's actually French, so it comes from when France had a monarchy. And the king.
How did that work out for him?
How
did that work out for him?
Yeah, not well for the kings. No, no. And so when they were holding court, I guess back in those times, the people who sat to the right of the king and the people who sat to the left represented a certain aspect of society. So on the left, you would have all the representatives of the working people, the population, basically.
Yeah.
And on the right, you would have landowners, lords, duchies, all that kind of aristocratic setup. And that's where it originally came from. And you can, if you think of it like that, you can see that, let's say, for example, we'll take the UK, for example, you've got clear difference between Conservatives and Labour. And the Conservatives, when you think back to what I've just explained, the Conservatives, you can see them being landowners, you can see them being landlords, you can see them owning large amounts of areas of Britain and that kind of stuff, passed down to them through family ties and all that kind of stuff. Like if you look at Richard Drax, who is one of the richest people in the UK, and he's rich, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, from money derived from the slave trade. And, Richard Drax has tried to offload his mansion or estate or whatever they used to call it in the Caribbean, instead of because it used to be a slave
like a plantation.
plantation. That's the word. And instead of giving it back to the country and saying sorry, he's trying to sell it for the largest amount he possibly can, even though he's one of the richest men in Britain. But that's the kind of people that we talk about when the original left and right. But then I think since then it's become slightly different. The World War II obviously had a massive impact on it. You know, the Nazis. Hitler were far right, as far as it'll go. And then on the opposite side, you had communism in Russia, and
theologies.
Well, it wasn't Russia, was it? Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Yeah, USSR. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So anyway, but getting back to your, I think both sides of that have been watered down considerably, so to end up where we are. And I think you're probably right. We're not actually talking far right or far left anymore. I think we're just talking which side of centre that they probably are.
I think in recent history, it would probably be Tony Blair who was the first centrist sort of, certainly in, living memory for us, I guess. Tony Blair would have been the first centrist leader. Which is probably why he was so popular at the time.
Well, yeah, I guess, and I've got a mind that Keir Starmer probably has modelled himself on that because, well, he saw that it got people elected.
Yeah.
So trying to appease both sides of.
I think he must have checked in the charisma box and found it was empty, though.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got their opinion on it, and that's what makes it such a difficult subject, really, politics, because we've discussed this before. I guess I'm probably more left of centre, and you're probably more right of centre. But
well, that's fair to say, yeah.
I mean, it just means that we've got slightly different outlooks on certain things, but we're so close to the centre now compared to what it was historically. I don't think there's a massive amount of difference. Yeah.
Do you think that those different views is something that you grow up with, or do you think it's your life experiences, or do you think it's a combination of all of those things?
I think it's a combination of how your parents or how your family voted or believed. Certainly coming from my background, I was born in York, but most of my young adult life I was brought up in Harrogate, which is lovely if you like that kind of thing. But I mean, it's not very diverse. I mean, the place is just rich old white people. I mean, it may have changed now, but we were talking now early 2000s up to, very early 2000s, late 90s. And that's pretty much what it was. But that was my outlook on it because those are the circles I lived in. And then I came to live in London. And it was coincidentally that time where my outlook on things. So before that, when I was living in Harrogate, my first time I ever voted at 18 was for Conservatives, and that's what my dad voted for. That's what I voted for. And then, I moved to London and started living right in the centre of London. So in some of the densest parts of London ever. And that was such a change for me. Yeah, but then I realised that half of the things that I've been taught from living somewhere else in the country where you don't get to experience all that is complete nonsense. And some of my closest colleagues at the time and friends and were completely different to the way I'd grown up. And then my outlook on things didn't change immediately, but it did change slowly, and I ended up being more left, I guess, than because all of the horror stories that I've heard or seen and in the news when you come down and then you start to live amongst these people, it's just a minority, but it makes good headlines.
Of course.
So yeah, changed, and my dad changed quite considerably actually, but only at the last. I think we discussed this before anyway, but
Yeah.
so my dad was self-employed, and he used to say a saying, which growing up I didn't even know what it meant, but he used to say, "I'm more right wing than Attila the Hun."
Okay.
That was his. So he was very right wing.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre, really, because I don't think he was in himself.
You probably just like the saying.
Probably, but he was a very self-motivated individual and business.
Well, really, I mean, that was the Thatcher dream, wasn't it? That was work hard. So that's probably where he, where that came from, really, because, like I say, the Thatcher dream would have been the late 80s, wouldn't it? Well, right through the 80s. Yeah, late 70s, early 80s, actually, right through the 80s. That would have been, the feeling of that time, that you work hard and you reap the rewards of that, and the system rewards you for that hard work. I'm reminded of Saturday Night Live at the time with Harry Enfield and loads of money.
Loads of money.
Loads of money. Look at my wad. Because he was the character that he played was a plasterer, and they worked hard and they got paid ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah. So, yeah, I kind of agree with it, but people don't realise Margaret Thatcher herself, I've met her, was actually a really nice lady.
Yeah, sure.
Personally, to speak to, but to run a country, she was terrible, and she couldn't even run her own finances.
Right.
In fact, the 115,000 people prime ministers get when they leave office was brought in specially for her because she was going to go bankrupt. And they said, well, we can't really have a prime minister going bankrupt, so we better think up some nonsense to give us some money. So that, and then ever since then, he needs a prime minister's authority to remove that. But nobody's going to do that.
No one's going to do that, are they? Why
of course not. It's like every prime minister gets police protection when they leave office. And that would take a prime minister to turn around and say, no, you know what, I think we'd change the law on that. But no one's going to.
So I wonder if Liz Truss gets that. Because
they do. They get the money and they get the protection. Anyone who's been prime minister gets a protection package, which is worth up to, well, depends who you are. Tony Blair's would be a massive target. Someone like.
So they just do a threat assessment on it, I guess, and then allocate a budget for it, I suppose.
So Tony Blair got his house. He gets the armored car and personal protection and all that sort of stuff. But he also gets static guards outside his house, which is the only ex-prime minister that gets that because he's that disliked. I think.
Yeah.
Except for Margaret Thatcher, she had the same. Well, she actually had more. She had a control room in the basement.
Well, that was probably because of the IRA, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was seriously the protection for her was serious. Yeah, it was immense. She was a massive target for that reason. And then Tony Blair, not so much for the IRA because he was part of the peace process, but
for the
Iraq War, maybe.
WMD and all that malarkey.
Yeah, absolutely.
We won't go down that rabbit hole today.
No.
So, should we just run through the UK results?
Yeah, go on. That's a good idea.
Okay. So we'll start off with Labour. We've got 412 seats, which is an uplift of 211.
That's a massive change, isn't it?
It's crazy. I was watching Sky News earlier, and they said that it's the Conservative result was their worst result since 1835, I think, which was when the House was set up in its present format. So basically, ever.
Right, yeah.
So Conservatives got 121 seats. I think they're there may well still be one seat to announce. I think that might be Basildon and Thurrock. They're doing a recount now. But anyway,
Right.
Conservatives, 121 seats. That's a drop of 251. Lib Dems, they did well, 71 seats. That's an uplift of 63. So that's obviously people that didn't vote Conservative but didn't want to vote Labour.
Right. So this would be Harrogate would be the perfect example. So my mum is a postal voter for Harrogate, but never received a postal vote. And in fact, out of all the people who live in France that I've talked to, the only people who have received their postal votes are if the person had lived in a council-controlled area that was anything other than a Conservative.
Right.
So I applied for a postal vote and never got it. And my constituency was Welling and Hatfield, which was Grand Shapps.
Yeah, well, he's down the road, isn't he?
Yeah, thank goodness. Anyway, but I never received a postal vote. Neither did my mum for Harrogate. So we weren't able to vote, even though we'd registered and applied for it at the earliest possible opportunity. And I know lots of people that didn't, unless they were in other council areas other than Conservative.
Yeah. Do you think that was just incompetence or some kind of conspiracy there?
I wouldn't say conspiracy. Well, is it? I don't know. It's not a big enough sample size to be able to say.
Yeah.
It's an anecdote, and that's all it is. But it's very much like the Brexit vote because everyone I knew in France who was voting in the Brexit, their ballot papers turned up damaged, pre-filled in, or an envelope with nothing in them.
Pre-filled in?
Yep.
That's unbelievable. I mean, that's
already filled in, already marked up for, would you believe, leave, obviously. So it was too late then to apply for another one. But I'm at least 10 of those I know of.
Yeah.
And they're all the same because they thought that, I mean, if you want to read it like that, again, it's just an anecdote, and plenty of people probably would have received their ballot. But we were all living in Conservative at the time, council areas, and it's the council and the Conservatives that are responsible for sending out the ballots. And obviously at that time they were heavily Leave because of it was
Boris Johnson, yeah.
Exactly. Similar situation this time, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just an anecdote. It doesn't mean anything, I suppose, but
yeah.
You
put a lot of anecdotes together. Yeah. Anyway,
so carry on. We went off a bit tangent again.
Moving swiftly on. So the SNP got 9 seats in Westminster, which is a drop of 38. Now that's obviously the kickback from the poison dwarf and her husband thieving all the money in it, allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah.
And others, 36. So it's independents. Which is an uplift of 15, and 5 from Reform.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. One of those independents was I can't remember his name now. He's the guy who got thrown out the Labour Party. He was the leader of the Labour Party for a while. Jeremy Corbyn. He stood as an independent.
Yeah.
In the same constituency, Islington North, I think, and won.
Yeah.
And he stood on the whole Gaza ticket, really, if you like.
Yeah, Islington, that's where I used to live. Is a very, I mean, he's been elected there way before this Gaza thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He's always been elected there, and he will always, as long as he stands for candidate, I think he'll get elected there because that's the type of demographic of the area. And as an MP, actually, he was always spot on.
I wonder what happened to Diane Abbott.
She's back in. She's back in. And she's in the Labour Party now as well. Yeah. Not minister, but she's an MP for Labour.
Yeah.
So she got re-elected as well.
Yeah, fair play.
But there's some people that didn't. What's his name? He it was going to be the Paymaster General. He was always on the radio, but he didn't get elected. He lost his seat.
What, Conservative, you mean?
No, Labour.
Oh.
Jonathan Ashworth. Jonathan Ashworth.
Yeah. That's the guy. Is that the guy that was involved in the post office? Doodah?
I don't know too much about that.
No.
No. So what's it going to mean for us, though, now, with the change of government, do you reckon? For the better or for the worse, do you think?
I would guess for the better. I would think, in a way.
Maybe, yeah. I mean,
I think the reason I say that is because Labour Party has been, or Labour government has been traditionally tax more, spend more, and so coming up to retirement, speaking for myself, obviously, young fella lad over here. Yeah, I mean, any improvement to the to the pension is going to be welcome, isn't it? And hopefully they'll be able to sort out the NHS. But call me an old cynic.
Yeah, I think we've passed the point with the NHS. It's too late. Too much damage has been done.
So what do you think is the answer then? Just to go over to like the French model with all, virtually private?
I think that's impossible. And I think it would be so expensive to do that because you're just not set up for it. Computer systems in the UK for things are not good.
They spent, billions, wasn't it? Setting up a new NHS computer system, and then 15 years down the line, I went, yeah, it doesn't really work. Scrap that.
Yeah, we'll scrap that. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. All my friends, well, not all my friends, but a good deal of my close friends are all in the police in the Met. And their incident system, so you ring up, you make a complaint, and it gets logged instantly on a CAD, which is a name for an incident report. And it gets a reference number. That system started many, many years ago, like unbelievably, probably 80s, I think. And it was actually an old British Airways luggage retrieval system.
Oh, really?
And it's not changed since.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like the air traffic control, isn't it? They've got a standby paper system, haven't they? So should the computers all go down, and the fail safes all fail and everything, they've got bits of paper, just stack them up on the wall, basically.
Yeah. But can you imagine now? So you approach the NHS hospital and say, right, somebody's got to work out a pricing structure, got to implement an IT system to bill people, and how are doctors going to be paid, and how is that all going to work? It's okay if it's set up like that, like the French system, the German system, Spanish system, all that. But you can't retrofit that to something like the NHS.
No, I can see that.
It's just impossible to do. So I don't know what the answer is. I know what they're probably going to do. They're going to heavily utilize private healthcare and just pay it from the NHS budget to get the waiting list down, to get people seen and get people fixed. And to be honest, it's the only option they've got. Anything else, like trained nurses, trained doctors, it takes too long. There are people right now, who need help.
Yeah.
And the only way to get that is to fire it all off to private industry, get it all done and start again and build it up.
So long as that works, to be honest, it doesn't really matter how it's done, so long as it works.
No. And people are often really concerned about running a country like a household budget. And you can't. because government has completely different borrowing and lending criteria, rates, the way they do it, that kind of stuff. It's just the two things aren't equivalent. So you can't say, we can't do that because it's going to cost too much money, but it's an investment in the future. Like if we manage to get the waiting list down, then it would actually work out cheaper, because you wouldn't have to pay for more expensive operations later on, or end of life care, or serious treatment if you nip it in the bud early. It's a self investing, I guess.
Yeah. What's curious is that when you look back at certainly the Victorian times, and the way that certainly in London and probably Harrogate as well, the infrastructure was built. The trains, the sewage systems, that was all built properly and to last. And the majority, certainly in London, the majority of what's going on underground, with the trains and the sewage, that's all Victorian, and it hasn't, it hasn't really changed.
Yeah, true.
But it just seems like I sound like an old French ear trumpet man here, but things don't seem to be done properly, do they? It's things are made down to a budget rather than up to a standard, which irritates me intensely.
Yes, I agree, and I just want to mention HS2 in this. In my mind, Britain can no longer do hasn't been able to do large infrastructure projects for a long time, and HS2 is a great example of that. And it's full of all sorts of corruption and everything that is bad about large projects. And I just want to give a shout out to Big Dave, because he lives he lives along the route. He lives in the Chilterns, near Aylesbury. And whenever I go and visit, there's a huge site that we pass in the car on the way, and it used to be all fields and then like a nature type nature reserve, and it all got bulldozed, and there's the largest work camp you've ever seen, with containers and diggers, and as far as the eye can see, and it's smack in the middle of this tiny little village on the route for the HS2, which it turns out is not going to be needed anymore. So they destroyed it all, completely flattened everything, and it's not going to be needed. They compulsory purchased all the houses.
Someone's making a vast amount of money somewhere.
Well, yeah, if you think about the northern bit of the HS2 where they said, we're not going to do that anymore, they compulsory purchased all the houses initially. And instead of offering it back to the original occupiers, they sold it all off to their friends.
Housing association.
Vastly reduced prices.
Yeah.
Which is
allegedly
shocking. But that's the thing about the British. They don't really get angry about these things, do they?
No, we're all sheep, are we?
Yeah. That's it. Oh, well, never mind. Yeah. Anyway, so HS2 was originally meant to go to Euston, and they said, oh, no, it's a bit more difficult than we thought it's going to be. How about we move it to the end of the Elizabeth line? That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? No, Denham. Who wants to go to Denham?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
So it's going to go not
58
even
stops to 58 stops to Denham, and then you get on a fast train.
Yeah, exactly. So that time they would have saved going to Birmingham.
Yeah.
It's not, because you've got to get the Elizabeth line now, which runs sometimes to Denham, and then go from Denham, which is right on the outskirts. It's just crazy.
Anyway, so
sorry, a tangent.
Bring it back to subject.
Yes.
So the French elections also taking place. So the figures I've got, because there's another round of voting Sunday, isn't there?
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, Sunday. Last Sunday's figures were National Rally 32%, and Marine Le Pen, I think she's playing the long game in that she's put this what's the fellow, Jordan Bardella, I believe his name is 29.
He's the president of the Rally National.
Rally, yeah. He's very photogenic, isn't he?
Yeah.
And
young as well, very young.
Yeah, he's got the charisma, and I think she's manoeuvring herself to take Macron's place as president.
Yeah, although that particular election doesn't happen till 2027.
Yeah, I believe so. But I think I think that's why she hasn't put herself up as, you know, in to be prime minister.
Yeah.
Macron's party, which is I can't remember what it's called. Renaissance Party, isn't it?
No. I had it there a second ago. Movement. Yeah, actually, it could be Renaissance Party.
Yeah. Anyway, Macron's party 15%. So National Rally 32%. Macron's party, whatever the hell it's called, 15%. And
En Marche.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
I'm sure.
And then the New Popular Front, which sounds like something from a 70s British sitcom, doesn't it?
It sounds like Monty Python, Live with Brian. People's Popular Front of Judea.
What have the Romans ever done for us? That's such a good film, isn't it? Yes, conjugate the verb.
Sorry if anyone hasn't seen that.
Yeah.
We just lost about 3 subscribers there.
That's it. I think we did. Sorry. Yeah. So the New Popular Front is a mixture of Greens and Communists and other left-wing, groups working in a collaboration that it appears that Macron's going to have to cuddle up to make an impact on the uplift that National Rally has made.
It's going to be very strange. Like if we do get this chap in as a prime minister, and you've got then the president at their opposites, nothing's going to get done.
It'll be like Trump with a Democrat house, won't it?
It's also very similar to the last 14 years of Sadiq Khan being the London mayor, and he's Labour, and the Conservatives absolutely hate him. So they've strangled him with every possible way that they can. They're not going to make it easy for him. They want to say, look how bad it is. It's a similar kind of thing. But, you know, what if we got a right, I won't say far right, but what if we got Marine Le Pen as a president? How would do you think that would affect us being immigrants?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's the question that most expats have been asking themselves. There's been all sorts of terrified people on Facebook talking about, oh my God, we're going to get put on cattle lorries, and taken somewhere. I mean, that's not going to happen, hopefully. And I think it's more a case of making a stand against illegal immigrants. It seems counterintuitive to persecute expats that are legally here and contributing, that are net contributors to the French economy.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to make any sense.
Yeah, but we know, looking back at Brexit, the countries don't do what is in their financial sense. They do what emotionally they want to do. Yeah. I would have agreed, prior to 2016, I would have agreed with you. But I just don't know. I mean, if we did get her as a president, there was some kind of incident in 2019 where Al Jazeera did an undercover investigation into the party in France, and the national rally leaders outwardly endorsed goals of to re-immigrate immigrants, sending them back to their countries of origin. That was actively discussed and agreed with. But on the same token as that, I'm pretty certain they don't mean people like us. If you were a Muslim, Arab, anybody from the Middle East, I would be worried. But not, I wouldn't have thought for us. If all your documentation is in order and you came here legally, I don't think it would make any difference to us whatsoever.
No, I don't.
However, there is one thing I would say about that. There is a policy that they will more likely than not adopt. And again, it would affect not me personally or you, but certainly British people or American people. But not because it was aimed at them. But like you said, it's aimed at illegal immigrants, but then there's the overlap on legislation, and that is that people born here to foreign parents won't necessarily be able to claim nationality.
Yeah, I read that too.
I think that would affect us, and I say us, I mean us immigrants. But I wouldn't have thought for me and you, who are here completely legally and have been contributing to society, etc., etc. And we've lived here a considerable amount of time. They may change the rules and what people can have to do to get here. I think they'll make that harder. But I think we would be fine, and people already living here would be fine.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things you wait and see, and yeah. I did make a note here. I feel like a turkey waiting for Christmas.
Apparently this situation has happened before, and in the end they
Don't tell me 1939, will you?
No. Do you know that's the funny thing about this whole thing? They spent 5 years under occupation of a far right power.
Yeah.
And the population are clamoring back for that. And I just find that
people have short memories. That's why.
It's not that long ago though.
Yeah.
You know, like we were born closer to the end of the Second World War or the discovery of the Holocaust than we are now to our own birth.
Yeah.
It wasn't that far away.
No, you're right. I mean, I was born in 1963.
You don't look it.
I've got a picture up in my loft.
I bet. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. But did you find out there's a site you can go on and find out how your local community voted? I don't know if you've.
No, I have not. No, that'd be interesting. Actually.
Yeah, so I looked. Wish I hadn't. All the village I'm in now was far right, a massive majority.
See, now you keep saying far right, don't you?
Of French politics.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much further right. Yeah. There is a national front. There is another party that's even more. But I'm going to say, when I say far right, I mean of the politics of the day. I don't mean throughout history. Because, as my dad said, there's always Genghis Khan, isn't there?
It's all relative, isn't it?
And they all voted for that. And the village my mum lives in, exactly the same, similar turnout. All voted in favour, but then we are talking like I was back in Harrogate. I'm out in the countryside here, have very little or no integration with anyone else other than people like myself. And so then I checked my other house in De Sèvres, and they voted for Macron.
Right.
But that town has a massive amount of British and American expats in.
Yeah, but they wouldn't vote though, would they?
No, but they integrate with the population. So that's immigrants mixing with the local population. So the local population see them as the immigrants and they think, oh, well, they're not too bad. So
they're not too bad.
They're not too bad. Well, I've got other things to worry about. Let's do that.
Yeah, interesting stuff, isn't it?
Yeah,
Interesting stuff.
I'll try and dig out the site. So if
I was
anybody,
just going to ask you actually if you'd got that, because I'd be interested in it.
I'll
Link
put
in the
it
description.
in the description.
Where were that before?
Yeah, so if we we put the link in the description. You can have a look at how your local town voted, and this is for the last or the initial round of voting. But it may also give you for Sunday. But we record this on a Friday, goes out on a Saturday, so it might not include the results unless you look after Sunday for that Sunday.
Yeah, I think maybe next week on the next edition, next exciting instalment of French Ear Trumpet. We'll just touch on the results briefly.
We'll do that at the beginning, I think.
Yeah.
So we can, and then what that might mean,
that
might mean for us.
That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
It's all up in the air at the moment.
Yeah. So just coming briefly back to the UK. Oh, actually, I'll tell you what we should also talk about. What's happening in the US? Because following the debate, Joe Biden, surely to God, he cannot keep going and expect to do another 4 years. Surely.
First thing I want to say is that the best? Those two people are the best. That
300 million people, and that's the best you got, is it?
Yeah. Hundreds of millions of people, the most powerful nation on the planet.
Yeah.
And you can either come up with a convicted felon or someone who's completely lost his mind.
Yeah.
I mean, we thought our politics was bad, but that is just insane, isn't it?
So one of the commentators I was listening to was saying that the Democrats have caught themselves in their own DEI policies, really. So clearly, Joe Biden's not going to be able to continue. So the obvious shoo-in would be Kamala Harris.
She's not very popular, is she?
But she's not popular at all. But because of the Democrat slavery to DEI,
do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, diversity, equality, and inclusion. So that would mean hiring someone not because they're the most qualified or they're the best at the job, but because of their demographic.
There are some other names that have been bandied around. I don't really know them, but they're just
I was going to come to that. So as I say, because the Democrats are sort of enslaved, which is a curious choice of words, but enslaved to the DEI policy, that means that they've got her back, Kamala Harris, and she's not got what it takes. In my opinion, for what it's worth, some of it in France.
That's to be honest, it's 50% of the opinions on here, so you fill your boots.
In my opinion, they are manoeuvring to get Gavin Newsom in, who's the governor of California. He's got great hair. I hate him already. He's got great hair, and he looks like a president.
Yeah.
Which is 50% of it, isn't it, really?
But we are glossing over. There's a Kennedy.
There is. Jack. What's his first name? Is it John? John Kennedy? What's his name? I can't remember.
I thought it was a Robert, but
Robert actually could be right. Yeah. Yeah, because he's really interesting guy. He had a brain injury, didn't he, or a disease that affected his voice. But he's. I watched an interview with him on. There's a really good podcast on YouTube by a fellow called Sean Ryan, who's an ex-Navy SEAL and CIA operative, and he gets all the best people on there. He gets really, really interesting people on there, and he interviewed him, and he was going into stuff that you wouldn't expect. You know, someone who's got a foot in the door of power, talking about the Kennedy assassination. You know, is pretty much saying that the CIA did it. They did it, and yeah, just amazing stuff.
Interesting. So, right, what do you think the outcome is going to be? Let's say, because they seem quite convinced that Biden's going to run. If he does, who's going to be president?
Over Trump, wasn't it?
So how's that going to affect us?
How's that going to affect us? Regardless of the fact that Trump's a convicted felon now, I mean, you could you could say that you know, that was there was a phrase that was used that was really clever in Fox News. Not that I ever watched Fox News, but it just caught my attention. It's lawfare.
Lawfare.
Lawfare. So they use law as a political weapon.
Yeah.
So regardless of all that, just brush that to one side for the moment.
Obviously.
I think to have someone in that position who might be crazier than the people that are threatening you can only be a good thing.
So he's said he's going to withdraw the funding. It's part of the Republicans don't want to send any money abroad, so they're going to withdraw or remove some or all of the funding to Ukraine.
Right. Yeah.
Which will mean a more or less instant takeover of Ukraine by Russia, unless some kind of deal can be struck. Now that I don't like the idea of, because suddenly we've always had that buffer of the Eastern Bloc between Russia and Europe. We won't really have that now. No. You'll have NATO countries like, I know Finland but they never were in NATO, but there used to be like a buffer between NATO and Russia. And now we won't have that. You'd have direct contact.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that there's a potential for a flashpoint.
And don't forget the mass, horrible, almost oppressive, I'm not going to use the word genocide, but the conditions inside Ukraine for the Ukrainians will be so bad that it's just not worth contemplating. It's more or less being an elimination of that particular country and their population, and it assimilated into a larger Russia. Which
I think everybody that's going to come into that circle of power should read that book that I recommended to you about nuclear war, about the second by second, the minute by minute escalation of a nuclear exchange. She was actually due to be interviewed by that Sean Ryan. He's recorded it. I think it's coming out this week.
I'll watch that, because following your recommendation, I did buy the book because I travel a lot, so I like to read books on the plane and stuff, and I got it, and it was very extremely interesting on how things could escalate very quickly, and it was quite detailed.
Yeah,
really was, and it's worth watching, really.
it was only 30 years ago that which isn't a long time, really. It was only 30 years ago that Russia disabled a system where they had sensors in the ground right along the Russian front that, should they detect a nuclear weapon landing on Russian soil, every single nuclear weapon would be launched.
Oh my God.
30,000 warheads would be launched.
Wow.
It was called a dead man's hand. That's only 30 years ago.
It's
for the sake.
very. I think we're living, and we've discussed this in one of our previous episodes, childhood then and now. So have a look at that in one of our previous videos. But we are living in precarious times. I know you had over the years, you've had the Cold War, you've had the Cuban Missile Crisis, all those kind of things. But it just seems there's so much going on right now. I don't know. They probably felt like that back then. So,
but you've got so many factors in play at the moment. You know, with the potential for Trump to come back in, the move to the right in European politics, the move to the left. It doesn't really matter what the UK does. No one's going to take it.
No one really cares about the UK.
No one cares. You know the Russian foreign minister, was it Lavrov?
Yeah.
I think he was asked. A Sky News reporter asked him what he thought of the result of Keir Starmer being Prime Minister. He just said, "I don't care."
No, nobody cares. I mean, there's so. I know it's bad because it's my own country, but it's quite inconsequential what happens in the UK now.
It is.
They don't have any influence over anything.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter.
It's like an aging champion boxer, isn't it? I used to be a contender.
I think they should, the whole of the UK, everyone, we should just use this time to take a look at themselves, fix the problems that they've got, and carry on from there. But I mean, it doesn't matter. I was actually speaking. I went out for coffee this morning. Sometimes I go to see my friend here for coffee and just discuss stuff just to improve my French. And obviously our conversations about the French elections and the British elections. And I asked him what he thought about the British elections, and he said, "Well, I
don't care." Boff.
Well, you do what you want, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was. It's not really. It is on the news here. I do watch and listen to the news occasionally, but it's just a one-liner. But if you think about it, if you lived in Britain, the French elections would just get a minute or two.
Yeah,
so every country just worries about what they do. But France is so well connected into Europe, being one of the two largest economies, that decisions that are made here will affect policy in Europe. So if we did get Marine Le Pen, then it would be different to the aims and goals of Mr. Macron. So that's something to be just mindful of, I think. Yeah.
Comes back to what I said right at the beginning. May you live in interesting times.
Oh, yeah. Who's that? Is that Robbie Burns, was it? Who was that? Who said that?
I think it's Chinese. I think it's a Chinese.
Is that because you found it a fortune cookie?
Yeah. I opened it up and it said, "Stop eating, you fat bastard."
You had one of them as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I suppose we're pretty much towards the end of it.
Here's a question. So, where do you see the UK in 2 years' time?
Same as where it is now. Very little difference. I think you've got to wait 10 years for any kind of noticeable difference. We might be able, in 5 years, we might be able
assuming that Labour in for 2 terms at least, isn't it?
I can't.
But the Conservatives are in the
either being another Labour after first, or a coalition of some kind, Lib Dem, Labour. But even if they dropped half the votes that they drop now, and they got split between the other parties, it still wouldn't be a Conservative government for a long, long time.
No.
I'm not worried about that. But the time it's going to take to fix 14 and a half years of pure austerity, which doesn't work, obviously. So we tried it for 14 years, it doesn't work. So they've got to do something else. Pretty much like after the Second World War, the loan to GDP ratio was 250%.
Oh,
So
okay.
we owed 250% of GDP, and it was
Mm,
borrowed by the then government to build infrastructure and prop up enterprises, which then led to it coming down and being less than 70%.
mm,
But you can't do that if you start off from a base where you're already 100. You know, you can't go down from that. You've got to borrow
mm,
more to improve the economy.
mm,
In fact, there's a guy, Ray Dalio, who manages a hedge fund in America.
mm.
He's written many books about this, the rise and fall of empires. And there's actually a YouTube video which I'll put in the link, and it's about the rise and fall of all the great dynasties across the world. So from before British, it was the Dutch,
Yeah, of course.
and they invented the first stock market.
Mm,
And then the British decided to take that over, and then you had the British Empire, and you also had, now you've got the American Empire, if you like. So it's how the signs that things are failing, and it's like a curve when it's going to crash. And it's
So
quite interesting.
is he suggesting that we're on the downward part of
The
the
British, yes, and American.
yeah,
On the up, obviously, is the Chinese,
yeah. Well,
which is going to be the next world power.
Chinese are from what I've read and from what I understand, the Chinese are different in that UK politics and UK planning, if you like, infrastructure planning is in 4-year cycles. So so they'll plan something until the next election.
Yeah,
The Chinese will plan 100 years time,
yeah.
and they're already planning what's going to happen in 50, 100 years.
Of course they are. They're buying up vast amounts of Africa.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah,
just investing in everything. And it's the same with the Middle Eastern countries. They're investing and in things that we wouldn't even think about. I listened to a radio program where Dubai, was it Dubai? Anyway, somewhere in the Middle East was throwing millions and millions at esports.
yeah.
And I didn't realize there was a lot of money to be made in it, but apparently there is.
Yeah, it's like Formula One esports, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just a way of them getting hold of things before we even know what's coming.
Well, I was watching Tucker Carlson in Australia, and he was saying that he was in Australia talking to an audience, and he said, "You do know that Australia has the biggest deposits of coal in the world,
Mm.
biggest deposits of coal in the world, and it's mined, sent to China, so that they can make renewables that Australia then buys."
All right. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's
and
superb.
they've also got the biggest iron ore deposits in the world there.
Yeah.
Also, that's mined, sent to China, where it's made into renewables.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely going to see a lot of change in the world,
Mm,
politics or otherwise,
yeah,
soon. Yeah. So time will tell, but we will be back on the next episode and tell you and just have a quick word about the voting on Sunday.
yeah, that'd be interesting to see what happens. So, is that the final vote for the French election on Sunday?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that'll set the.
We'll know what's going on.
We'll know. Yeah,
We'll
we'll know.
show who the prime minister is going to be.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess we'll see,
that's it. That's it.
as they say. All right, so I think we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for watching. Very much appreciated, and thanks to all the new subscribers. If you made it this far, well done, you.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to give the video a thumbs up, share it on your socials, press the notification bells when you know that, so that you know when there's new content. Maybe think about subscribing if you're not subscribed already. And all that leaves to say is just goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him.